Welcome back to a brand new audiobook of The Art of Seduction. Before we begin, let me ask you something. What would you think if the real power in life didn't come from force, pressure, or being the loudest person in the room, but from understanding seduction psychology, the quiet art of drawing people in, making them want to listen, want to connect, and want to say yes? When you hear the phrase Art of Seduction summary, you might think this is just about romance, candlelight, and smooth talkers in movies. But what if I told you that Robert Greene's The Art of Seduction is actually a masterclass in seduction and influence, the kind that shapes leaders, negotiators, creators, and anyone who works with people? Have you ever met someone who didn't have to try too hard, yet everyone leaned in when they spoke, trusted them quickly, and felt strangely drawn to them, and wondered, what do they know that I don't? That's exactly what this Robert Greene Art of Seduction breakdown explores, the hidden emotional mechanics behind attraction, charisma, and psychological pull. And no, you don't need movie star looks or a magician's voice, because this book argues that influence is emotional, not physical. In this Art of Seduction journey, we'll unpack the seducer archetypes, those powerful personality energies that naturally attract people, and the famous 24 seduction strategies, which are less about manipulation and more about emotional awareness, patience, timing, and understanding human desire. Because let's be honest, people don't resist logic nearly as much as they resist pressure, and they don't fall because they're pushed, they fall because they're fascinated. Ever notice how uncertainty can be more intriguing than certainty? How mystery beats oversharing? How someone who listens deeply feels more magnetic than someone who talks nonstop? That's not an accident. That's seduction tactics explained through psychology. And when used ethically, these ideas can improve your communication at work, your leadership presence, your networking skills, even how you present ideas. Because at its core, this book asks a bold question: how to seduce anyone. Not in a creepy way, relax, we're not turning you into a cartoon villain, but in the sense of how to connect, captivate, and inspire emotional engagement in a world where attention is scarce and everyone is distracted. So, if you've ever wanted to be more memorable in meetings, more compelling in conversations, more confident in social settings, or simply understand why people do what they do beneath the surface, then you're in the right place, because this isn't about tricks, it's about emotional intelligence with style, awareness with timing, and influence without force. And trust me, once you start seeing the world through this lens, every interaction becomes a little more interesting, a little more human, and a lot more powerful. So let's start. Part 1 of The Art of Seduction is where Robert Greene quietly flips the script on what most people think influence is. Because instead of teaching lines, tricks, or pickup nonsense, he asks you to look at human nature through a psychological lens, where seduction means influence without force, the ability to move people emotionally rather than pushing them logically, since humans almost automatically resist pressure. Tell someone what to do and watch them stiffen, yet the same person will lean forward, open up, and volunteer their time, trust, and attention when they feel fascinated, seen, or emotionally stirred. Which is why the real difference between force and emotional persuasion is that force attacks the mind, while seduction enters through feelings, imagination, and desire. And this plays out everywhere, not just in romance, but in leadership, politics, sales, social life, and creative work. Because the boss everyone respects isn't the one who shouts the loudest, but the one whose presence makes people want to perform. The public figure who captivates voters isn't reciting spreadsheets, but creating emotional resonance. And the person who walks into a room and somehow becomes the center of gravity isn't necessarily the most qualified, but the most psychologically engaging, which leads to the first pillar of the book. Who you are matters before what you do, because people respond to emotional atmosphere more than strategy, meaning your vibe, confidence, mystery, warmth, or intensity are communicating long before your words arrive. And Greene breaks this into seductive character types, not as costumes, but as emotional energies. The intense one, the mysterious one, the comforting one, the bold one, showing that attraction and influence grow from amplifying authentic traits rather than faking personalities, while also warning about anti-seductive habits like neediness, self-absorption, or trying too hard, which is like emotional repellent no cologne can fix. And the second pillar, how you act, only works once the character foundation is set, because techniques without presence feel manipulative. So the mindset shift he wants is simple but powerful. Stop analyzing people like logic problems and start observing them emotionally. What do they crave? Where are they bored? Where do they want to feel more alive? Because once you understand that people are driven less by reason and more by longing, you stop trying to win arguments and start creating emotional experiences, which, honestly, is a lot more useful in real life than memorizing clever lines.
All right, imagine we're continuing from part 1, where we learned that influence starts with emotional awareness, not clever lines. And now part 2 deepens that idea by showing that attraction doesn't begin the moment you make a move. It begins the moment someone feels something in your presence. Because seduction, in Greene's psychological sense, starts before action, before strategy, before words, in the emotional atmosphere you create. The subtle signal that says, being around me feels different. And this is why character comes before technique. Since people don't logically evaluate whether they should be drawn to someone, they simply notice they feel more alive, more seen, more intrigued. Which is also why effort often backfires, because trying too hard smells like pressure, and humans resist pressure like a cat resists a bath. But emotional presence, calm confidence, mystery, warmth, intensity, playfulness, works indirectly. And that's where the psychology of attraction kicks in. Most people are bored inside their routines, stuck in roles like employee, parent, responsible adult, and they crave temporary escape from that identity. So attraction becomes emotional stimulation, a break in the pattern, a moment that feels cinematic instead of ordinary. And fantasy often has more pull than plain reality, which is why people are drawn to those who make interactions feel slightly heightened, more meaningful, more emotionally colorful than daily life. Greene then explains this through 9 seductive energies, not as masks, but as emotional effects you amplify depending on your nature, like the siren, who radiates pleasure and fantasy so strongly that others forget their stress, the rake, whose intensity of desire makes people feel deeply wanted in a world where most feel ignored, the ideal lover, who listens so well and notices such small details that others feel uniquely understood, the dandy, who stands apart from social norms and becomes magnetic through uniqueness, the natural, whose spontaneity and openness feel refreshing in a guarded world, the coquette, who creates tension by mixing warmth with distance, which, yes, is why we all sometimes chase the person who replies late, the charmer, who makes others comfortable and valued, the charismatic, who radiates belief and certainty that people want to borrow, and the star, who uses a bit of distance and mystery so others project their own fantasies onto them. And then Greene balances this by warning about anti-seductive traits that quietly kill attraction in everyday life, like neediness, which feels like emotional pressure, self-absorption, which makes others feel invisible, insecurity, which drains emotional energy, and moralizing, which makes interactions heavy instead of pleasurable. And when you step back, you realize this isn't about manipulation at all, but about emotional intelligence, learning to notice what people feel rather than just what they say, understanding that influence grows from emotional experience, not logical persuasion, which helps in dating, yes, but also in leadership, teamwork, networking, creative work, even friendships, because the people we remember, trust, and follow are rarely the most forceful. They're the ones whose presence changes how we feel. And once you see that, you stop trying to impress and start learning how to connect on a deeper emotional level, which is a much more powerful skill in real life than any script.
So after part 1 teaches that influence starts with emotional presence, and part 2 shows that attraction begins before action,
Chapter 1 zooms in on a truth most people miss. You don't create desire from nothing, you discover it, because people are already walking around with emotional gaps, missing feelings, unmet needs, unlived parts of themselves. And Greene's idea in Choose the Right Victim isn't about targeting people in a predatory way. It's about understanding that influence works best where there is readiness, where someone already feels bored, unseen, restless, underappreciated, overly controlled, or stuck in an identity that feels too small. And if you've ever tried convincing someone who's perfectly satisfied with their life to want something new, you know it's like trying to sell a winter coat in Miami. But meet someone who feels emotionally cold, and suddenly you don't need persuasion, just presence. This connects directly to the earlier idea that seduction is emotional, not logical, because logic argues while emotion searches. And most people are searching for something: excitement, validation, safety, admiration, freedom, inspiration, even if they don't consciously admit it. So Greene suggests observing rather than performing, watching how people talk about their lives, what they complain about, where their eyes light up, what they joke about wanting someday, because those are clues to the gap. And the right victim, in psychological terms, is simply the person whose missing piece matches the emotional energy you naturally carry. Like the charmer fitting someone who feels stressed and wants ease, the ideal lover fitting someone who feels overlooked, the dandy fascinating someone bored with conformity. And this is why effort feels unnecessary when alignment exists, because the person feels understood without you forcing anything, which is also why trying to impress everyone is a losing game, since not everyone is ready or compatible emotionally. Think about workplaces, where one manager inspires a team effortlessly while another struggles with endless motivational speeches, often because the first one senses what the team lacks, maybe recognition, autonomy, or purpose, and fills that emotional space. And Greene's deeper point is that influence is less about what you give and more about what the other person is already hungry for. So instead of asking, how do I make them like me, the better question becomes, what are they missing emotionally? And do I naturally offer that? Which shifts your focus outward and makes interactions calmer, more observant, less needy, and ironically, more magnetic. Because people feel when someone is trying to get something from them, but they relax when someone seems to understand them. And the humor in all this is that humans walk around thinking they're mysterious puzzles while broadcasting their emotional needs louder than a Wi-Fi signal with no password. You just have to pay attention. And when you do, influence stops feeling like manipulation and starts feeling like connection built on emotional timing, which is useful not just in romance, but in leadership, networking, sales, creative collaboration, and friendships. Because the right message to the wrong emotional state falls flat, but the right presence at the right emotional moment feels almost effortless.
So if Chapter 1 was about recognizing that people already carry emotional gaps, Chapter 2 is about how you enter their world without setting off alarms. Because the moment someone feels pursued, pressured, or analyzed, their defenses go up faster than a car window in a sketchy parking lot. And Greene's idea of creating a false sense of security is really about indirectness, approaching sideways instead of head-on, since humans are wired to resist obvious intention, especially emotional or persuasive intention, but they relax when things feel casual, natural, even accidental, which is why the most influential people rarely announce their goals. They create comfort first, letting the other person feel in control, unthreatened, and free. Because freedom lowers defenses, and lowered defenses open emotional access. Think of how different it feels when someone immediately tries to impress you or sell themselves, versus when someone simply shares a laugh, asks about your interests, or connects over something neutral like music, a project, or even complaining about the office coffee, which may taste like it was filtered through regret. And this isn't manipulation in the cartoon villain sense, it's psychological pacing,
understanding that trust builds in layers and that indirect roots, shared environments, mutual interests, light conversation, small favors, humor, storytelling, allow emotional familiarity to grow without the pressure of expectations. And Greene emphasizes disguising intensity with ease, meaning you might be highly interested, but you don't show hunger, because hunger creates tension, while calm curiosity creates safety. And safety is the emotional doorway to influence. This connects to part one's idea of character, because your emotional presence must feel relaxed, not needy, and to chapter one's idea of alignment, because once you sense someone's emotional gap, you don't rush to fill it. You become a comfortable part of their environment first, like background music that slowly becomes their favorite song. And in everyday life, this is powerful in work relationships, friendships, and networking, where the person who immediately pushes their agenda is often avoided, but the one who builds rapport, listens, and lets connections develop organically becomes trusted, which later makes ideas, requests, or deeper conversations flow more easily. And the humor here is that humans love believing they made their own decisions, so the best way to influence is often to remove the feeling of influence altogether, allowing people to move towards you naturally, which requires patience, emotional awareness, and the confidence not to force outcomes. And once you understand this rhythm, first alignment, then safety, then gradual emotional connection, you realize attraction and influence feel less like effort and more like timing, where the indirect path isn't slower, it's smoother and far more effective because people resist being pushed but rarely feel comfortable.
So now that we've seen how influence starts by finding emotional gaps and then approaching indirectly so people feel safe, Chapter 3 adds a psychological ingredient that really locks attention in: uncertainty. Because once someone feels comfortable, the danger is predictability, and predictability is the fast lane to boredom, while mixed signals, small shifts between warmth and distance, clarity and mystery, presence and absence, create emotional tension that keeps the mind engaged. And Greene's point here isn't to act erratic or play childish games. It's to understand that humans are pattern-seeking creatures, and when a pattern becomes too clear, interest drops. But when the pattern is slightly unpredictable, the brain leans in, trying to solve the puzzle, which increases emotional focus. Like when someone is sometimes deeply attentive and at other times slightly out of reach, not cold, not rude, just not fully available. And suddenly the interaction has energy. This connects smoothly to Chapter 2's idea of safety, because you establish comfort first. Otherwise, unpredictability just feels unstable. But once trust exists, a touch of mystery stimulates curiosity. And to Chapter 1's alignment, because the mixed signals should revolve around the emotional gap you identified, amplifying desire without overwhelming the person. And you see this dynamic everywhere, from relationships to leadership, where a boss who is always the same becomes background noise, but one who occasionally surprises the team with unexpected recognition, new ideas, or shifts in tone creates engagement. And socially, think about how someone who reveals everything about themselves in 1 hour leaves nothing to discover, while someone who shares in layers, hinting at depth, makes you want another conversation. Psychologically, uncertainty activates imagination, and imagination is more powerful than reality because the mind fills in blanks in idealized ways, which is why Greene emphasizes controlled ambiguity, signals that can be read in more than one way, like humor that could be playful or slightly suggestive, eye contact that lingers a second longer than normal, compliments that are sincere but not overly direct, creating emotional electricity without pressure. And yes, this is where people often mess up by going too far, becoming confusing instead of intriguing, which leads to frustration instead of fascination. So the key is emotional rhythm, a dance of closeness and space, clarity and subtlety. And honestly, you've felt this before, like when someone replies quickly sometimes and slower other times, and suddenly your brain turns into a detective agency analyzing punctuation. And while that can be overdone, in balanced form, it keeps emotional energy alive, because certainty relaxes the mind, while uncertainty focuses it. And Greene's deeper lesson is about managing perception, understanding that attraction isn't built through constant availability or constant distance, but through variation that mirrors how stories keep us hooked: tension, release, mystery, reveal. And in everyday life, this helps you avoid oversharing, overcommitting, or trying too hard to lock things down, teaching patience and emotional control, since the moment you rush to remove all uncertainty, you often remove the spark too. And the humor is, humans say they want clarity, but emotionally they thrive on a little mystery, like claiming you'll just watch one episode and suddenly it's 2 a.m. because the unresolved pulls you forward. And when used with empathy and awareness, this principle isn't manipulation, it's understanding how attention and desire naturally work, making interactions more dynamic, engaging, and memorable without force.
So after we've found the emotional gap, entered indirectly, and kept attention alive through a bit of mystery, Chapter 4 introduces a social psychology amplifier that explains a lot of human behavior we pretend we're above, but absolutely are not. And that's the triangle. The idea that desire often increases when we see that other people value, admire, or want the same person. Because humans don't just decide value individually, we read it socially. Like we're all quietly checking reviews before buying a product, except the product is a person, an idea, or even a leader. And Greene's point is that when someone appears desired, respected, or in demand, it lowers doubt and raises curiosity, because social proof kicks in, and the mind thinks, there must be something special here, which connects directly to Chapter 3's uncertainty and Chapter 2's safety, since the triangle adds intrigue without direct pressure. And it builds on Chapter 1's alignment because the person already has an emotional gap, so seeing others drawn to you suggests you might be the answer. This isn't about jealousy drama or childish games, it's about perceived value, which works everywhere, not just in dating, because the job candidate who is considering other offers suddenly looks more impressive. The speaker introduced with enthusiasm by others seems more credible. The restaurant with a line outside magically tastes better. And socially, someone who moves easily between groups, who is appreciated by friends, colleagues, or a community, appears more magnetic than someone isolated. And Greene emphasizes subtlety, because obvious attempts to provoke jealousy feel manipulative and backfire, while natural signs of desirability, being engaged in your own life, having friends, being respected, being busy with meaningful pursuits, create the triangle effect organically. Psychologically, this works because humans fear missing out and trust collective judgment. So when someone else's attention is present, it validates the emotional risk of getting closer. And it also reactivates the imagination, since now the person isn't just interesting, they're chosen. And being chosen by others signals hidden value, which is why over-availability reduces attraction, while a socially rich life increases it. And there's humor in how we all act independent, but still peek at what everyone else is doing before deciding what's good, like pretending you discovered a band on your own after hearing 3 friends mention them. And in a healthy, positive sense, this principle encourages you not to center your world around one person or one opportunity, but to build a full life, strong social connections, passions, and purpose, which naturally makes you more attractive and influential without trying, because you radiate that others already see worth in you. And Greene's deeper message is about perception shaping reality, since people often decide how to feel about you based on how others seem to feel. So cultivating genuine social value, not fake hype, strengthens your influence in leadership, networking, creative work, and relationships. And when combined with emotional awareness, indirectness, and controlled mystery, the triangle doesn't manipulate, it amplifies existing interest, making desire feel socially supported instead of risky, which lowers resistance and deepens curiosity. And once you see this dynamic, you realize attraction is rarely just between 2 people. It's shaped by the social world around them, whether we admit it or not.
By this point in the seductive process, after recognizing someone's emotional gap, approaching in a way that feels safe, keeping attention alive with a bit of mystery, and raising your perceived value through subtle social proof, Chapter 5 goes deeper into the psychology of desire by explaining that
Strong attraction often grows not just because of who you are, but because you awaken awareness of what feels missing in the other person's current life. And Greene's point in Create a Need is not about putting someone down or making them feel inadequate, but about contrast. Because people adapt to their routines so thoroughly that they stop noticing their own boredom, emotional flatness, or quiet dissatisfaction. And when you bring a different emotional experience into their world, more excitement, more attention, more depth, more playfulness, more meaning, you gently disrupt that numb comfort, like opening a window in a stuffy room they forgot had air, and suddenly what once felt fine now feels limited. Psychologically, this works because humans don't change when things are stable. They change when they feel a gap between what is and what could be. And your role in this chapter is to represent the could be, not through bragging or criticizing their life, but through the emotional atmosphere you create, the conversations that go beyond surface talk, the curiosity you show about their dreams, the way you highlight possibilities they've ignored. So instead of telling them their life is dull, you make moments with you feel vivid, and that contrast does the talking, which ties back to earlier principles, since safety allows openness, mystery keeps attention, and social value lowers resistance. But now, emotional stimulation begins to reshape how they see their own world. You see this dynamic outside of romance all the time, like when a mentor introduces new ways of thinking and suddenly an employee realizes they've outgrown their role. Or when a creative friend shares ideas that make someone rethink their boring routine. And Greene emphasizes subtlety again, because pushing dissatisfaction too hard creates defensiveness, while gentle questions, new experiences, or emotional depth make people arrive at the realization themselves, which is always more powerful. And yes, there's humor in how humans will complain endlessly about their lives, yet cling to the familiar like it's a security blanket from childhood. But the moment they taste something more emotionally engaging, their perspective shifts fast. The key is that you don't position yourself as the solution directly. You embody an alternative emotional reality, showing through presence that life can feel richer, more alive, more meaningful. And this increases emotional reliance naturally, because people gravitate toward what expands them. And when used ethically, this principle encourages you to bring value, inspiration, and emotional depth into others' lives rather than manipulation, which makes it useful in leadership, friendships, teamwork, and creative collaboration. Since the people who influence us most are those who make us aware we've been settling for less than we're capable of. And when combined with patience and awareness, creating a need becomes less about control and more about awakening, helping others reconnect with desires, dreams, and emotional energies they had quietly put to sleep.
By the time we arrive at this stage, we've already seen how desire builds when someone feels safe, intrigued, socially reassured, and slightly dissatisfied with their emotional routine. And now, Chapter 6 introduces one of the most subtle psychological tools in the art of seduction, insinuation, which is influence through suggestion rather than direct statements. Because the moment you tell people what to think or feel, their inner defense lawyer wakes up, objects loudly, and starts building a counterargument. But when an idea feels like it came from their own mind, resistance disappears. And Greene's insight here is that the human brain is more persuaded by what it concludes itself than by what it's told, which is why hints, tone, imagery, questions, stories, and emotional cues work more deeply than blunt declarations. And this connects naturally to everything before it, since safety lowers defenses, mystery engages attention, emotional contrast stirs desire, and now insinuation guides the imagination without triggering resistance. Think about how different it feels when someone says, "You should try something new, you seem bored," versus, "I read about this place where people completely lose track of time because it's so different from everyday life." And suddenly, the second approach invites curiosity without pressure,
letting the other person mentally step into the possibility. And Greene emphasizes that insinuation works through the senses and emotions, a certain tone of voice, a pause, a look, a playful comment that could mean more than it says, because humans are highly responsive to subtext, often more than literal words, which is why movies use music and lighting to make you feel something before you consciously know why. And socially, the people who are most influential often speak in stories, metaphors, or open-ended observations rather than commands, allowing listeners to project themselves into the idea. And yes, there's humor in how obvious advice is often ignored, while vague quotes on social media suddenly feel life-changing, because we love thinking we discovered wisdom on our own. The key is subtlety and emotional timing, since insinuation should feel natural, woven into conversation, not like a magician winking after every sentence. And it's most effective when aligned with the emotional gap you already identified, nudging attention toward what's missing, what's possible, what could feel better, without ever saying, "I am the answer," because once that's spoken directly, the spell breaks. And this principle is powerful beyond romance, helping in leadership, negotiation, parenting, and creative work, where guiding people toward insight through questions and stories builds deeper commitment than orders ever could. And Greene's deeper lesson is about respecting the autonomy of others' minds, understanding that influence is strongest when invisible, when people feel free, when ideas grow naturally inside them, and when combined with emotional presence, patience, and awareness, insinuation transforms communication from pushing to planting, making interactions smoother, more engaging, and more psychologically intelligent, which in real life means you stop arguing people into change and start inviting them into new ways of seeing. And that shift alone can change how every conversation unfolds.
Now that the process has moved through safety, intrigue, emotional contrast, and subtle suggestion, Chapter 7 takes us into one of the most powerful and human parts of influence, entering another person's spirit, which really means stepping inside their emotional world and mirroring it so accurately that they feel deeply understood. Because after all the mystery and tension we've built, connection now becomes the hook. And Greene's idea here is simple but profound. People are drawn to those who reflect them back, not in a fake, robotic way, but in emotional rhythm, values, mood, and perspective. Since humans trust familiarity, and when someone seems to get us without long explanations, we relax, open up, and bond faster, which ties perfectly to earlier chapters because you've already observed their emotional gap, approached without pressure, sparked interest, and gently stirred dissatisfaction with the ordinary. So now you use all that information to align your emotional tone with theirs, matching their pace of speech, their energy level, their sense of humor, their concerns, even their worldview, not by copying, but by empathizing so well that your responses feel natural. Psychologically, this works because people crave validation of their inner experience, and most rarely receive it. So when someone listens closely, echoes feelings, and shows genuine understanding, the emotional impact is strong. Like the difference between someone nodding politely and someone saying, "That must have felt frustrating, especially after all the effort you put in," which signals emotional presence. And Greene warns that this requires attention, not performance, because forced mirroring feels creepy, like a bad actor repeating lines. But true emotional attunement feels warm and safe. And you see this in great therapists, leaders, teachers, and close friends who adjust themselves slightly to meet others where they are, making interactions feel smoother and more intimate. This chapter also balances earlier uncertainty, because after mystery draws someone in, recognition keeps them there. And humor sneaks in here too,
since we all know the awkward moment when someone clearly didn't listen and responds with something wildly off-topic, instantly breaking connection, which shows how fragile emotional alignment can be. And in everyday life, this skill improves teamwork, friendships, and communication, because when you sense whether someone needs encouragement, space, excitement, or calm, you respond in ways that feel supportive rather than intrusive. And Greene's deeper lesson is that influence grows when the other person feels emotionally safe and understood, not judged or overridden. So entering their spirit is less about strategy and more about empathy sharpened into awareness, using observation, patience, and genuine curiosity to tune in to their emotional frequency. And when combined with the previous steps, value, intrigue, contrast, suggestion, this creates a powerful sense of connection where influence no longer feels like something you're doing to someone, but something happening naturally between you, which is far more sustainable and positive in real life than any forceful approach.
By the time we reach this point in the seductive process, emotional alignment has been built, curiosity is alive, trust exists, and a subtle bond has formed through empathy and shared emotional rhythm. And now, Chapter 8 introduces temptation, which Greene frames as the art of presenting pleasure, excitement, or emotional reward in a way that feels close enough to sense, but not so close that it's fully possessed. Because once something is fully secured, the emotional chase relaxes. But when it remains just slightly out of reach, desire stays active. And this isn't about denial or coldness, it's about pacing and anticipation. The psychological truth that the imagination often creates stronger pleasure than immediate fulfillment, which is why movie trailers, previews, and hints can feel thrilling than the actual thing. And this ties back to earlier principles. You identified their emotional gap, approached safely, created intrigue, stirred dissatisfaction with the ordinary, guided thoughts through suggestion, entered their emotional world, and now you offer glimpses of the emotional experience they want: joy, intimacy, adventure, validation, inspiration, but in measured doses so they lean forward instead of leaning back. Psychologically, this works because anticipation activates dopamine, the brain's motivation chemical, more strongly than reward alone, which explains why waiting for something exciting can feel electric. And Greene emphasizes subtle signals, playful teasing, future-oriented conversation, shared inside jokes, hints of experiences you might share, moments of closeness followed by space, creating an emotional rhythm where pleasure is associated with you but never oversupplied. And yes, this can easily go wrong if taken to extremes, becoming frustrating or manipulative. So balance matters, because temptation should feel inviting, not withholding, like offering the aroma of fresh cookies without slamming the oven door in someone's face. In everyday life, this principle shows up in leadership, creativity, and social dynamics, where the best communicators don't dump everything at once. They reveal ideas gradually, keeping others engaged, or in friendships where planning something fun builds excitement before it even happens. And humor lives here too, because humans are famously terrible at resisting what feels just out of reach. Diets crumble at the sight of dessert. Productivity vanishes when a quick scroll is promised, showing how powerful anticipation is. And Greene's deeper message is that desire thrives in space, not in constant availability. So emotional presence should feel rich, but not overwhelming, allowing others to participate in the unfolding rather than consuming the entire experience instantly. And when combined with empathy and awareness, temptation becomes less about manipulation and more about emotional pacing, teaching patience, subtlety, and respect for how desire naturally grows, which in real life helps us avoid overgiving, oversharing, or rushing connections, instead building relationships, influence, and engagement that feel alive, dynamic, and willingly chosen, because people value most what they move towards with their own desire, not what's handed to them without effort. At this stage in the seductive process, after emotional alignment, intrigue, contrast, suggestion, empathy, and temptation have all been set in motion, Chapter 9 sharpens one of the most powerful psychological levers of all, suspense, which Greene frames as the art of never giving full emotional certainty, because certainty relaxes attention, while uncertainty sustains it. And humans, despite claiming they want clarity, are emotionally wired to stay engaged with what feels unresolved, like a story that ends on a cliffhanger, or a song that pauses before the final beat. And this connects directly to everything before. Since suspense only works once safety exists, interest is alive, and desire has been awakened. Otherwise, uncertainty just feels like instability. But when the emotional foundation is there, a bit of unpredictability keeps the mind active, the imagination engaged, and the connection dynamic. Psychologically, suspense works because the brain seeks closure, and when closure is delayed, attention intensifies, which is why we check our phones again when a message is left unread, or replay conversations in our heads when someone's behavior is slightly ambiguous. And Greene's lesson here is about emotional pacing, offering moments of closeness, insight, humor, or warmth, followed by space, shifts in tone, or a change in rhythm, not to confuse, but to prevent emotional flatlining, since constant reassurance can make interactions feel static, while variation creates movement. And you see this principle everywhere outside romance, from great leaders who don't reveal every plan at once, but unfold vision gradually, to storytellers who reveal character layers over time, to teachers who ask questions before giving answers, keeping curiosity alive. This also builds on temptation from the previous chapter, because pleasure just out of reach becomes more powerful when wrapped in suspense, and on insinuation, because suggestion leaves room for interpretation, and on emotional mirroring, because you sense when the other person needs reassurance versus when mystery fuels attraction, making suspense a dance rather than a formula. And yes, the humor here is that humans are walking contradictions, swearing we hate uncertainty while binge-watching shows designed entirely around it, proving we emotionally crave what we logically complain about. And Greene's deeper point is that influence thrives in emotional motion, not emotional conclusion. So by not rushing to define, label, or finalize every feeling, you allow space for imagination, anticipation, and desire to breathe, which also encourages patience and emotional control on your side, since the urge to secure certainty often comes from anxiety, and learning to sit comfortably in unfolding dynamics builds confidence and presence. Applied positively, this chapter teaches you not to overshare, overpromise, or over-explain, but to let connections develop naturally, to allow conversations to end on a note that invites continuation, to leave room for growth instead of closing the emotional book too quickly. And when balanced with empathy and respect, suspense doesn't manipulate, it maintains vitality, keeping relationships, leadership, and social interactions alive rather than predictable. And once you recognize how much human attention feeds on the unresolved, you start to see that the most memorable experiences, people, and moments are rarely the ones that gave us total certainty, but the ones that left us wanting to know what happens next.
Up to this point in the seductive process, we've worked mostly through atmosphere, timing, mystery, and emotional rhythm. But Chapter 10 brings the spotlight onto something we use every day and still underestimate: words, not as information delivery, but as emotional instruments. Because Greene argues that language can bypass logic and go straight to the imagination. And once emotion, imagery, and story are activated, influence deepens without feeling forced, which connects perfectly to the earlier idea of insinuation. Since suggestion plants seeds, suspense keeps attention, temptation builds desire, and now words give those feelings texture, color, and movement. And the key insight here is that dry, factual speech engages the mind briefly,
while emotionally charged language creates mental pictures that linger, like the difference between saying, "It was a nice trip," versus, "It felt like time slowed down," like the air itself told us to breathe differently. And suddenly, the listener is there, experiencing rather than analyzing. Psychologically, stories and sensory language work because the brain responds to narrative as if it's reality, activating emotional centers, which is why we cry at fictional movies while knowing they're fake. And Greene emphasizes using tone, pacing, metaphor, humor, and vivid detail to create an emotional atmosphere through conversation, not to overwhelm, but to enrich. Because once someone associates you with stimulating, imaginative dialogue rather than routine chatter about traffic and emails, interactions feel more alive, and you become linked with emotional experience, not just information exchange. This builds directly on previous chapters. Since emotional gaps create readiness, safety allows openness, mystery captures attention, contrast stirs desire, empathy builds connection, and suspense keeps engagement, but words now guide imagination, giving form to feelings already present. And this is powerful beyond romance, shaping leadership, teaching, sales, creative work, and friendships. Because the people who inspire us rarely just present facts. They tell stories, paint visions, and use language that makes possibilities feel tangible, while the ones who speak in monotone bullet points often struggle to move anyone. And yes, there's humor in how humans remember a dramatic story about someone's coffee disaster more vividly than a perfectly logical explanation of productivity techniques, proving that emotion sticks. And Greene's caution is subtlety again, because over-the-top drama can feel fake. So authenticity matters, using your natural voice but leaning into imagery, curiosity, and emotional nuance, asking questions that open mental doors, sharing anecdotes that reveal feeling rather than just events, and even playful exaggeration at times, because laughter creates emotional bonding. The deeper lesson is that words don't just describe reality, they shape how reality is felt. So when you speak in ways that evoke imagination, you invite others into a richer inner world, which strengthens connection and influence without pressure. And in everyday life, this encourages us to be more mindful communicators, choosing language that uplifts, intrigues, and resonates instead of defaulting to dull routines. And when combined with patience, empathy, and emotional awareness, the power of words becomes less about persuasion tricks and more about creating shared emotional experiences, which is ultimately what people remember and respond to long after the conversation ends.
By now in the seductive process, we've built emotional readiness, entered gently, sparked curiosity, created contrast, used suggestion, aligned emotionally, introduced temptation, maintained suspense, and brought imagination alive through words. And Chapter 11 zooms in on something deceptively small but psychologically huge: detail. Because Greene argues that attention to detail communicates emotional value more powerfully than grand gestures, since humans equate being carefully noticed with being important, and in a world where most interactions are rushed, distracted, and surface level, someone who observes the small things stands out like high definition in a blurry environment. This connects directly to earlier ideas about creating need and entering someone's spirit, because once emotional alignment exists, noticing details, preferences, moods, stories, habits, subtle changes in tone proves that your attention isn't generic, it's focused, and focused attention feels personal, which builds trust and emotional significance. And psychologically, this works because being seen in specifics validates identity, like remembering how someone takes their coffee, recalling a story they mentioned weeks ago, noticing when their energy is off, or referencing something they care about without being reminded, which signals you're not just another face in the crowd. And yes, the humor is that many of us can remember song lyrics from 2005, but forget what a friend told us yesterday. So the person who actually remembers feels almost magical, even though it's just awareness. Greene emphasizes that detail creates emotional texture, turning interactions from abstract to vivid, like the difference between "I had a rough day"
And "I could tell you were drained in that meeting, you went quiet after the second question," which shows presence rather than politeness. And this principle applies beyond relationships into leadership, teamwork, and influence, where the manager who notices effort, growth, and individual strengths builds loyalty, while the one who treats everyone generically struggles to inspire. Because attention signals care, and care deepens connection. This chapter also balances the mystery and suspense from earlier, because while unpredictability keeps interest alive, detail builds emotional grounding, showing that behind the intrigue is genuine awareness, which prevents the process from feeling shallow. And Greene's deeper lesson is that emotional value is often communicated indirectly, not through declarations like "I care," but through actions that demonstrate observation, patience, and memory. Since requiring slowing down, listening, and being mentally present, qualities that are increasingly rare, making them even more impactful. And in everyday life, this encourages us to replace autopilot with attentiveness, to listen not just to respond, but to understand, to treat small preferences and emotional shifts as meaningful rather than trivial, which strengthens friendships, work relationships, and communication overall. Because when people feel seen in detail, they relax, open up, and engage more deeply. And once you grasp that attention itself is a form of emotional currency, you realize influence often grows not from dramatic moves, but from consistent, thoughtful awareness that makes others feel valued in ways they may not even consciously articulate, but definitely feel.
Up to now, we've seen how emotional connection is built through attention, timing, empathy, mystery, and vivid language. And Chapter 12 takes all of that and adds an aesthetic layer to influence, poeticizing your presence, which means turning ordinary interactions into experiences that feel slightly elevated, symbolic, or memorable. Because Greene's insight is that people don't remember routine exchanges. They remember moments that feel different from the background of daily life. And this connects naturally to the previous chapter on detail, since noticing specifics gives you the material, and now you shape it into atmosphere, using setting, timing, mood, and emotional tone to make interactions feel like scenes rather than transactions. Psychologically, this works because memory is emotional and sensory, not logical. So when a moment includes imagery, mood, novelty, or symbolic meaning, it lodges deeper in the mind. Like how a simple walk feels forgettable, but the same walk at sunset with a meaningful conversation suddenly becomes a memory. And Greene's insight is that people associate you with heightened experiences, thoughtful environments, unexpected gestures, meaningful timing, playful rituals, aesthetic touches. Not in a fake or theatrical way, but through intention. Because most of life runs on autopilot, and the person who adds a touch of atmosphere stands out. This builds on earlier principles, since emotional safety allows presence to be felt. Suspense and temptation keep attention alive, and words create imagery. But poeticizing presence gives those feelings a stage. And you see this outside romance all the time, like a teacher who dims the lights to tell a story, a leader who frames a project as a meaningful mission instead of a task list, or a friend who turns an ordinary dinner into a small celebration. And yes, there's humor in how easily humans can be moved by simple aesthetic shifts, like candles suddenly making leftover pizza feel gourmet, which shows how context shapes emotion. Greene's deeper message is that people crave experiences that feel larger than routine, moments that hint at meaning, beauty, or story. And when you bring that quality into interactions, you're not just another person in their day, you become part of their emotional narrative, which strengthens connection and influence naturally. And this principle also encourages mindfulness, because to create memorable moments, you must be present yourself, noticing timing, mood, and emotional flow instead of rushing, which has positive value in all areas of life, helping us slow down, appreciate atmosphere, and bring intention to how we share time with others.
And when combined with empathy, detail, and emotional awareness, poeticizing presence isn't manipulation, it's artistry in human connection, transforming simple moments into experiences that linger. Because long after facts fade, people remember how a moment felt and the person who made it feel that way.
Friends, Chapter 13 introduces something that sounds risky but is psychologically powerful: strategic vulnerability. The idea that controlled, genuine glimpses of weakness build trust far more effectively than constant strength. Because perfection creates distance while humanity creates connection. And Greene's point is not to overshare, trauma dump, or turn conversations into therapy sessions nobody signed up for, but to reveal just enough imperfection, uncertainty, or personal history to signal that you are real, emotionally accessible, and not hiding behind a polished mask, which connects directly to earlier steps. Since emotional safety has been established, curiosity is alive, and attention is focused. So now a well-timed moment of openness deepens the bond, like admitting a past mistake, sharing a meaningful struggle, revealing a private fear, or laughing at your own flaws. Because psychologically this lowers defenses as people relax around someone who isn't performing invincibility, and it activates reciprocity, the natural urge to open up in return. Think about how different it feels when someone only talks about achievements versus when they admit they once doubted themselves before succeeding. The second version feels relatable, and Greene emphasizes control and timing, since vulnerability too early feels forced and too much feels burdensome. But placed after trust exists, it humanizes without weakening your presence. And yes, the humor here is that humans bond faster over shared awkwardness than shared excellence, like two people instantly connecting over mutual social anxiety at a party while the coolest person stands alone, proving that relatability beats perfection. This chapter also balances mystery and suspense, because while earlier you maintained intrigue, now you offer emotional depth, preventing the connection from feeling surface level, and it strengthens the sense of emotional value from noticing details, because sharing something personal signals that the other person has earned access to a more private layer of you, which increases their sense of significance. And in everyday life, this principle is powerful in leadership, friendships, teamwork, and influence, where a manager admitting uncertainty about a challenge builds more loyalty than pretending to know everything, or a friend sharing a real struggle invites deeper connection than constant positivity. And Greene's deeper lesson is that trust grows when strength and vulnerability coexist, because pure strength can intimidate and pure weakness can repel. But balanced humanity feels safe and authentic, encouraging emotional closeness without pressure. And when done with self-awareness, strategic vulnerability also requires emotional intelligence on your side, knowing what to share, when to share it, and why, ensuring the intention is connection rather than attention-seeking, which ultimately adds positive value by teaching us to be more open, empathetic, and real in our interactions. And once you understand this, you stop trying to impress people with perfection and start connecting through honesty, which, ironically, is far more influential. Chapter 14 moves into a subtle psychological zone Greene calls the perfect illusion, which isn't about deception in a malicious sense, but about understanding that human attraction always lives somewhere between reality and imagination, and the most powerful connections allow space for fantasy while still being grounded enough to feel safe. Because if everything is too ordinary, desire fades into routine. But if everything is pure fantasy with no substance, trust collapses. So the art here is blending the two, letting people experience you as real, yet slightly elevated, like a movie scene that feels believable but still more vivid than everyday life. This builds directly on poeticizing presence and suspense, since you've already learned to create memorable moments and leave space for imagination, and now you shape perception gently, highlighting your most compelling qualities, your passions, your emotional strengths, your style, while letting mystery and suggestion fill in the rest. And psychologically, this works because people project their own desires and ideals on what they don't fully know, which is why early stages of connection often feel magical. And Greene suggests maintaining a bit of that glow by not over-explaining yourself, not reducing everything to mundane details too quickly, allowing conversations, settings, and shared experiences to carry a slight sense of story, symbolism, or emotional tone. Think about how different it feels when someone describes their work as "I handled data processing" versus "I helped turn chaos into clarity." Both are true, but one invites imagination. And yes, the humor here is that humans are walking special effects machines, capable of turning a normal coffee meetup into a main character moment if the vibe is right, proving that perception shapes experience more than facts alone. The caution is balance, because the illusion must be sustainable, rooted in genuine traits, not a fake persona that collapses under pressure, which is why earlier chapters emphasized character first, so the illusion is really selective emphasis, showing the most emotionally resonant parts of who you are, while letting the ordinary details unfold gradually. And this principle extends beyond romance into leadership, branding, creativity, and social presence, where people who frame their ideas, work, and personalities with vision and meaning inspire more engagement than those who present everything in flat, literal terms. And Greene's deeper lesson is that humans don't fall for reality alone. They fall for the story they feel part of. So when you blend authenticity with imagination, you create an emotional experience that feels richer than routine life, which is why this adds positive value when used ethically, encouraging us to bring intention, creativity, and emotional awareness into how we present ourselves and share moments, rather than shrinking into dull predictability. And when combined with empathy, detail, vulnerability, and suspense, the perfect illusion keeps connections alive, meaningful, and slightly enchanted. Because people may live in reality, but they long to feel part of something that feels just a little more magical than their daily routine. As the process deepens and connection has been built through empathy, shared atmosphere, vulnerability, imagination, and emotional rhythm, Chapter 15 introduces isolation. And this is one of those ideas that sounds darker than it needs to be, because Greene isn't talking about cutting someone off from their world in a controlling way, but about creating an emotional bubble, a space, physical or psychological, where outside noise, opinions, and distractions fade, so the connection between two people can intensify without constant interference. Because human feelings are highly influenced by environment, and when we're surrounded by routine settings, familiar people, and everyday responsibilities, our emotions stay regulated and predictable. But when context changes, when time feels set apart, when attention narrows, feelings often grow stronger and more vivid, which is why vacations feel different from work days, and late-night conversations feel deeper than small talk at noon. This connects smoothly to poeticizing presence and the perfect illusion, since you've already learned to create memorable moments and a slightly heightened emotional atmosphere, and now isolation protects that atmosphere from being diluted, giving space for emotional momentum to build. And psychologically, this works because social influence is powerful. People often look to friends, habits, and surroundings to decide how to feel. So when you remove constant external cues, the person pays more attention to their internal experience. And if that experience with you feels engaging, safe, and stimulating, it grows in significance, like how a meaningful conversation during a quiet walk feels more impactful than the same talk shouted over a loud party. This doesn't require dramatic gestures. It can be as simple as choosing environments that encourage focus, quieter settings, shared activities, long conversations without interruptions, or creating psychological isolation through inside jokes, shared stories, or private references that make the interaction feel like its own world. And yes, there's humor in how humans can suddenly spill their life story at 1 a.m. in a car parked outside a house, proving that context can turn ordinary people into philosophers. And Greene's deeper message is about emotional containment, allowing connection to develop without being constantly evaluated by outsiders, which reduces self-consciousness and increases authenticity. And this principle extends beyond romance into leadership, mentorship, and friendship,
where one-on-one time builds stronger bonds than group settings, and where meaningful influence often happens in focused conversations rather than public performance. The key, though, is ethical balance, because healthy isolation is temporary and respectful, creating space for connection, not control, encouraging emotional presence, not dependence. And when combined with empathy, detail, vulnerability, and imagination, this step allows feelings to deepen naturally, since people often discover what they feel only when distractions fade. And in real life, this reminds us of the value of undistracted time, of stepping away from constant social noise to build real connection, which is increasingly rare and therefore powerful. Because when two people share a moment that feels separate from the world, even briefly, it often becomes more emotionally meaningful than dozens of surface-level interactions. And that's the psychological core Greene is pointing to here.
After all the intrigue, emotional rhythm, atmosphere, imagination, and deepening connection we've built, Chapter 16 brings the process back down to something solid and grounding, proving yourself. Because no matter how fascinating, poetic, or emotionally engaging someone is, desire can't fully settle into trust without consistency and reliability. And Greene's point here is that once emotions are involved, people become vulnerable, so they start quietly asking, is this real or just a performance? And this is where your actions have to match the emotional experience you've been creating. Since earlier stages sparked imagination and excitement, but now stability keeps the connection from feeling like a dream that disappears in daylight. Psychologically, humans need emotional stimulation, but they also need security. And if unpredictability continues without reassurance, anxiety replaces attraction. So proving yourself means showing up when you say you will, keeping promises, being emotionally steady rather than dramatically shifting, and demonstrating through behavior that the connection isn't built on fleeting mood, which ties back to earlier vulnerability, because openness builds closeness, but reliability builds safety, and both are needed. This is where influence moves from spark to substance, and you see this everywhere beyond romance, like a leader who inspires with vision but earns loyalty by following through, or a friend who is fun and engaging but also dependable when things get tough. And yes, the humor here is that humans are surprisingly forgiving of awkwardness or imperfection, but almost allergic to inconsistency, since nothing drains emotional energy faster than wondering where you stand, like waiting for a text that may or may not come while your brain writes 20 dramatic storylines. And Greene emphasizes that proving yourself doesn't mean losing mystery or charm. It means anchoring those qualities in trust, turning emotional excitement into something that feels safe to invest in. This chapter also balances suspense and temptation from earlier, because once connection deepens, too much uncertainty feels destabilizing. So you gradually shift from playful unpredictability to dependable presence, showing emotional maturity. And the deeper lesson here is about integrity, since influence that isn't supported by consistent behavior eventually collapses, while influence grounded in reliability becomes long-lasting. And in real life, this is incredibly valuable, teaching us that being impressive once is easy, but being steady over time is what builds real respect, trust, and connection, whether in relationships, work, friendships, or leadership. And when you combine emotional awareness, creativity, empathy, and imagination with follow-through, you become someone others not only feel drawn to, but feel safe with. And that combination, fascination plus reliability, is what transforms temporary attraction into meaningful, lasting influence. As the connection becomes grounded in trust and reliability, Chapter 17 adds a surprisingly deep psychological layer, regression, which Greene describes as gently awakening emotions tied to childhood, feelings of play, wonder, safety, curiosity, and being cared for, because beneath adult roles and responsibilities, people still carry those early emotional patterns, and when those feelings resurface in a positive way, bonds can intensify quickly. Since childhood was when emotions were felt most strongly and directly, before we learned to filter everything through logic, status, and social armor. This fits naturally after proving yourself, because trust creates the safety needed for people to relax their adult defenses. And now, regression adds warmth and emotional depth, shifting the tone from structured adult interaction to something more spontaneous and emotionally open. And psychologically, this works because nostalgia, playfulness, shared laughter, gentle teasing, storytelling, and moments of lightheartedness activate parts of the brain associated with comfort and attachment, which is why inside jokes, playful competitions, silly traditions, or reminiscing about childhood memories can create closeness that formal conversation never reaches. And yes, the humor here is that even the most serious professionals can light up instantly over a board game, a favorite childhood snack, or a ridiculous memory, proving that the inner 10-year-old never really left. Greene's idea isn't to infantilize or manipulate, but to balance adult seriousness with emotional warmth, because constant intensity or formality can feel heavy, while moments of play make connection feel safe and joyful. And this principle shows up everywhere outside romance too, like leaders who use humor and lightness to build team morale, friends who share nostalgic stories that deepen bonds, or mentors who encourage curiosity instead of rigid performance. And it connects back to earlier chapters on atmosphere and poetic presence, since shared experiences that feel outside routine often carry a sense of timelessness similar to childhood memories. The key is authenticity, because forced playfulness feels awkward, but genuine lightness creates emotional ease. And Greene's deeper lesson is that strong influence isn't just about stimulating desire or building trust. It's about touching emotional layers that feel familiar, safe, and joyful, reminding people of parts of themselves they don't always get to express in adult life, which adds positive value by encouraging us to bring more warmth, humor, and play into our interactions, helping relationships feel less like negotiations and more like shared human experience. And when combined with reliability, empathy, and imagination, regression softens the connection, making it feel comforting rather than intense, and memorable rather than formal, because people may respect competence, but they bond through shared laughter, nostalgia, and moments that feel emotionally simple and genuine, like stepping briefly outside the pressure of adulthood into a space where connection feels easy and natural.
As the connection deepens through trust, emotion, playfulness, and reliability, Chapter 18 moves into a subtle but powerful social force, taboo. And Greene's idea here isn't about pushing people into reckless or harmful behavior, but about the psychological intensity that forms when two people share something slightly outside the ordinary rules of their social world. Because humans are deeply shaped by norms, what's polite, expected, appropriate. And when a bond includes a shared secret, a private joke, an honest confession, or a conversation that goes beyond surface-level acceptable talk, it creates a feeling of exclusivity and emotional closeness, like the sense that we've stepped outside the crowd for a moment, which strengthens connection. This builds naturally on earlier chapters, since safety, empathy, vulnerability, and emotional alignment are already in place, and now the relationship gains a layer of intimacy through trust-based disclosure. Because when someone shares something personal, slightly rebellious, or socially guarded, and you respond without judgment, the emotional impact is strong, as people rarely feel free to reveal unfiltered thoughts, unusual dreams, fears, doubts, or unconventional opinions. And when that space exists, bonds intensify. Since psychologically, shared secrets create an us feeling, a private territory separate from the outside world. And yes, there's humor in how quickly people can feel close after whispering something like, "Okay, I've never told anyone this," but instantly turning a normal conversation into a mini spy movie of emotional disclosure. Greene's caution is important here because taboo should be emotional, not destructive, meaning it's about depth, honesty, and stepping beyond superficial roles, not encouraging harm or breaking serious boundaries. And in everyday life, this appears in friendships that grow through late-night honest talks, teams that bond over candid behind-the-scenes truths, or creative partners who share bold ideas others might dismiss. And this connects back to regression, since childhood-like openness and play can lead to honest expression, and to poetic presence, since shared moments outside routine feel memorable, and to insinuation and suspense, since what's unsaid or private often carries emotional charge. The deeper lesson Greene points to is that intimacy grows when people feel they can reveal parts of themselves usually hidden, and that this requires emotional maturity and trustworthiness on your part, because mishandling someone's disclosure destroys connection, while honoring it deepens loyalty. And in a positive sense, this chapter encourages us to create judgment-free spaces, to listen without rushing to correct, to allow conversations that go beyond small talk, which adds value by fostering authentic relationships rather than shallow interactions. And once you understand how powerful shared emotional territory is, you see that influence and connection aren't built only through excitement or charm, but through trust strong enough to hold the parts of ourselves we don't show everyone. And that kind of bond feels meaningful because it's rooted in real human complexity, not performance.
By the time we reach this stage, the connection has moved far beyond surface attraction into trust, shared experiences, vulnerability, playfulness, and even private emotional territory. And Chapter 19 adds a layer that can make bonds feel deeply meaningful rather than just emotionally exciting. Spiritual lures, which Greene uses to describe the pull of shared ideals, purpose, values, or a sense that the connection stands for something bigger than immediate pleasure. Because humans don't live on emotion alone, we also crave meaning, direction, and the feeling that our experiences are part of a larger story. And when two people feel aligned on beliefs, dreams, creative visions, or personal growth, the relationship gains depth and gravity, shifting from "this feels good" to "this feels important," which psychologically strengthens attachment since meaning justifies emotional investment. This builds naturally on earlier chapters because empathy created understanding, vulnerability built trust, shared secrets created intimacy, and now shared purpose gives the bond a narrative, something to move toward together. And Greene's point isn't about pretending to have grand philosophies or faking spirituality, but about recognizing and highlighting genuine points of alignment, shared passions, values, curiosity about life, desire to grow, interest in art, ideas, causes, or personal development, and bringing those into conversation and shared experiences. Since people feel deeply connected to those who understand not just their emotions, but their inner direction. You see this everywhere outside romance, in friendships formed through common missions, in teams bonded by shared goals, in mentors who inspire through vision rather than instruction. And yes, there's humor in how humans can bond intensely over something as random as a mutual obsession with a niche hobby, suddenly acting like they've found their long-lost tribe, proving that shared meaning doesn't have to be cosmic, just personally significant. Greene emphasizes that spiritual connection often involves language of growth, destiny, learning, or transformation, because these themes elevate interaction beyond routine. And this ties back to poetic presence and the perfect illusion, since shared purpose adds a sense of story, and to regression, since it reconnects people with youthful dreams they may have sidelined. And the deeper lesson is that influence becomes lasting when it aligns with who someone wants to become, not just how they feel in the moment, which adds positive value by encouraging us to connect on levels that inspire rather than distract. helping relationships, leadership, and friendships become sources of motivation and personal development. And when approached ethically, this chapter isn't about manipulating beliefs, but about discovering genuine common ground and nurturing it, creating connections where both people feel understood in their deeper motivations, which makes the bond feel purposeful, supportive, and meaningful. And when emotional excitement is supported by shared direction, the relationship feels not just attractive, but significant, like it belongs in the larger story of one's life, rather than just passing through it. By now, the connection we've been building has layers of trust, shared emotion, meaning, vulnerability, and even a sense of shared purpose. And Chapter 20 introduces one of the most powerful and misunderstood psychological dynamics in human attachment: pleasure and pain, or more accurately, emotional contrast. Because Greene's core idea isn't about causing harm or cruelty, but about understanding that emotions feel stronger when they move through contrast, since the human nervous system is wired to notice change more than steady states, which is why a joyful moment after stress feels more intense, a reunion after distance feels warmer, and relief after uncertainty feels deeper. And in relationships or influence, when experiences include both lightness and seriousness, excitement and calm, challenge and comfort, the emotional memory becomes richer and more memorable. This connects directly with earlier chapters on suspense, regression, and spiritual meaning. Since suspense created uncertainty, regression brought playfulness, purpose added depth, and now contrast gives the emotional journey texture. Because if everything is consistently pleasant but flat, it can feel forgettable, like background music, while a mix of emotional tones creates a story the mind holds onto. And you see this outside romance all the time, in movies that mix tension and humor, in friendships that include both deep talks and ridiculous laughter, or in meaningful achievements that feel rewarding precisely because effort came first. And yes, the human humor here is that we complain about stress, but still binge-watch dramatic shows that emotionally wreck us, proving we secretly value emotional intensity when it's safe and meaningful. Greene's lesson is subtle. Moments of emotional distance, reflection, or challenge can make closeness feel more valuable, but this must be natural and respectful, not manipulative, since intentional emotional harm destroys trust, while healthy contrast might look like giving space for independence before reunion, mixing playful banter with sincere appreciation, or balancing light experiences with deeper conversations, allowing people to feel a full emotional spectrum. And this deepens attachment because the relationship becomes associated with vivid emotional memory rather than monotony. It also reinforces earlier ideas of proving yourself and vulnerability, since contrast without stability creates anxiety, but contrast within a foundation of trust creates depth, like waves that rise and fall while the shore remains steady. And the deeper takeaway here is about emotional intelligence, understanding that meaningful human connection isn't about keeping everything perfectly smooth, but about navigating emotional variation with care, empathy, and respect, which adds positive value by teaching us to appreciate both joyful and challenging moments in relationships, friendships, work, and personal growth, recognizing that emotional richness often comes from movement between states rather than permanent comfort. And when handled maturely, this dynamic makes bonds feel alive, memorable, and emotionally real, not staged or flat, because humans don't attach to perfection. They attach to experiences that make them feel deeply, safely, and meaningfully engaged.
After all the emotional buildup, the attraction, the shared meaning, the vulnerability, the emotional contrast, Chapter 21 brings in a principle that feels simple but is psychologically powerful. Give them space, because nothing cools desire faster than emotional overcrowding. And Greene's insight here is attachment strengthens when people feel they are choosing, moving forward on their own energy rather than being pulled or pressured, since humans instinctively value what they invest effort in. And when someone has room to think, miss you, wonder, and move toward you voluntarily, the connection feels self-generated rather than imposed. This fits perfectly after pleasure and pain contrast, because now we see how absence, pauses, and breathing room allow emotions to settle and deepen, like letting a song fade out so its melody lingers in your head. And psychologically, space activates imagination, and imagination often intensifies feelings more than constant presence ever could. Since when someone isn't right in front of us, the mind fills in gaps, remembers highlights, softens flaws, and replays emotional moments, which is why anticipation can feel stronger than consumption. And yes, the humor is that humans will ignore something freely available, but obsess over what's slightly out of reach, like suddenly craving a snack you didn't even want until someone else grabbed the last one. Greene's point isn't to disappear or play games, but to avoid overexposure, emotional chasing, or constant reassurance seeking, because that creates pressure, and pressure triggers resistance, while respectful space signals confidence, independence, and emotional maturity, which are naturally attractive traits. And in everyday life, this principle shows up in healthy friendships, where people don't demand constant contact, in leadership, where autonomy builds engagement, and in creative collaboration, where freedom sparks motivation. And it connects back to earlier lessons on character, proving yourself, and emotional presence, since giving space works only when a foundation of trust and connection already exists. Otherwise, distance just feels like disinterest. And the deeper lesson is about self-sufficiency, understanding that strong influence comes not from clinging, but from having your own emotional center, your own life rhythm, allowing connection to be a choice rather than a dependency, which adds positive value by encouraging healthier, less anxious relationships where both people maintain individuality. And when someone returns after space and feels welcomed rather than interrogated, the bond strengthens, because closeness that follows freedom feels more genuine. And in the end, this chapter reminds us that attraction, influence, and connection grow best in environments where people feel free, curious, and self-motivated, not cornered, since the strongest bonds are the ones people walk into willingly, not the ones they're held inside. As the emotional, psychological, and meaningful layers of connection have been built, trust, contrast, shared purpose, space, and vulnerability, Chapter 22 brings attention to something more subtle but deeply wired into human experience, the physical lures, or what we can think of as sensory anchors, because while emotions and ideas create connection, the senses make experiences stick in memory. And Greene's insight here is that sight, sound, scent, touch, and environment quietly shape how people feel, often more strongly than words, since the brain links emotion to sensory detail, which is why a certain song can take you back years, a familiar smell can trigger nostalgia, or a particular place can feel emotionally charged. This chapter connects beautifully with poetic presence and regression from earlier, because we've already created emotional atmosphere, and now sensory elements give that atmosphere texture, making moments feel vivid and real rather than abstract. And the idea isn't about flashy appearance or surface glamour alone, but about consistency and intentionality in how you show up physically and environmentally, your style, voice tone, pacing, gestures, the spaces you choose to share, the lighting, music, even the rhythm of your movements. All these create an emotional signature, and humans respond instinctively to these cues, often before conscious thought kicks in, which explains why someone's calm voice can relax a room, or warm lighting and soft music can make conversation feel more intimate. And yes, there's humor in how powerful this is, like how people suddenly feel sophisticated holding a coffee in a cozy cafe with jazz playing, as if the soundtrack upgraded their personality. Greene's deeper lesson is that influence works through immersion, and sensory details help create that immersive feeling, making interactions feel like experiences rather than transactions. And in everyday life, this appears in leaders who use environment to inspire focus,
friends who create memorable gatherings through atmosphere, or anyone who understands that how something feels often matters as much as what is said. And this ties back to giving space and emotional contrast, since sensory anchors can make reunions feel warm, pauses feel reflective, and shared moments feel distinct from routine life. The positive value here is about awareness, learning to be more present, not only emotionally, but physically, noticing how environments affect mood, how tone changes meaning, and how small sensory details can make interactions more comforting, engaging, or memorable, which encourages us to design experiences thoughtfully rather than moving through life on autopilot. And when combined with authenticity and emotional intelligence, sensory presence doesn't feel artificial. It feels attentive and alive, creating connections that linger in memory because they're attached to feelings people can almost see, hear, and touch in their minds later, which is why certain people or moments stay with us long after they're over, not just because of what was said, but because of how it all felt.
After all the emotional groundwork, trust, shared meaning, sensory atmosphere, space, contrast, and psychological alignment, Chapter 23 arrives like the moment in a movie where the music swells and something finally happens, the bold move. And Greene's message here is that influence and attraction cannot remain forever in anticipation, because tension without resolution eventually fades. So at the right moment, decisive action seals everything that has been building, transforming emotional potential into reality. And psychologically, this works because humans crave emotional closure after suspense, like the relief of the final scene after a long buildup. And if that moment never comes, the experience feels incomplete, which is why hesitation can quietly dissolve connection, while confident action creates clarity. This connects directly with previous chapters, since you've built emotional presence, trust, shared experiences, and safety, and now action shows certainty. And certainty is attractive when it follows emotional attunement, because it signals confidence without pressure, direction without force, and commitment without desperation. And yes, the humor is that humans often overthink this stage into paralysis, rehearsing imaginary conversations in their heads like they're preparing for a courtroom trial, when the actual moment usually requires simple, clear expression. Greene emphasizes timing, since a bold move too early feels intrusive and too late feels anticlimactic. But when emotional signals, comfort, and engagement are present, action feels natural, like the next step in a story already unfolding. And this principle extends far beyond romance, appearing in leadership when someone steps forward to take responsibility, in careers when a person asks for an opportunity, or in friendships when someone openly expresses appreciation. And in each case, decisive action transforms unspoken potential into lived reality. The deeper lesson here is about courage paired with emotional intelligence, because boldness without sensitivity feels aggressive, but sensitivity without boldness leads nowhere. And when balanced, decisive action feels reassuring, like someone finally turning intention into direction, which often strengthens respect and connection. And this chapter adds positive value by reminding us that growth in life often requires stepping forward despite uncertainty, trusting preparation, emotional awareness, and timing, and understanding that clarity can be a gift, reducing confusion and strengthening bonds, since people feel more secure when they know where they stand. And when this move is delivered with warmth, confidence, and respect, it doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like momentum, the natural conclusion of everything that came before, turning emotional possibility into meaningful shared experience. And now we arrive at the part most people skip in their minds, but experience very real in life, the after effects. Because once emotions have been stirred, bonds formed, tension built, trust created, meaning shared, and bold moves made, nothing simply resets to neutral. And Greene ends the process by reminding us that influence always leaves emotional consequences, both for others and for ourselves, since when you awaken desire, attachment,
hope, or emotional depth, you're working with powerful human forces, not light switches. And feelings don't disappear just because the exciting phase is over, which is why this final chapter is less about technique and more about awareness and responsibility, tying back to everything before it. Psychologically, intense emotional experiences create memory imprints, and people attach not just to outcomes, but to how they felt during the journey. So if the connection brought joy, growth, inspiration, or meaningful experience, the after effect can be gratitude and lasting warmth. But if emotions were stirred carelessly, without empathy or consistency, the after effect can be confusion, hurt, or resentment. And yes, the uncomfortable humor of being human is that we often chase emotional highs without thinking about the emotional cleanup afterward, like throwing a party in someone's feelings and forgetting to help tidy up. Greene's caution is that influence magnifies emotional states, so emotional intelligence, integrity, and self-awareness matter even more at the end than at the beginning, because this is where your character shows most clearly, whether you handle outcomes with maturity, clarity, and respect, or avoid responsibility. And this connects back to proving yourself, vulnerability, shared meaning, and space, since healthy after effects involve honest communication, emotional steadiness, and respect for the other person's experience. And in everyday life, this principle applies to leadership, friendships, creative partnerships, and family, where actions and emotional impact linger beyond the moment, shaping trust and reputation over time. The deeper lesson is that real influence isn't just about creating powerful experiences, but about considering what remains afterward, understanding that meaningful connection can uplift, inspire, and enrich people's lives when handled with care, and that the goal isn't emotional control, but emotional awareness. Because when experiences end with dignity, honesty, and emotional consideration, they become positive memories rather than emotional knots. And this adds real value by encouraging us to move through relationships and interactions with more mindfulness, recognizing that emotions are not disposable. And when you combine everything from the journey, empathy, presence, creativity, courage, sensory awareness, and respect, the after effects become something beautiful: growth, learning, meaningful memory, and emotional depth that shapes us in constructive ways rather than leaving confusion behind, which is Greene's final reminder that the most powerful form of influence is the one that leaves people better, clearer, and more aware, not depleted.
And when you step back from everything we've explored, all the psychology, the emotional layers, the atmosphere, the tension, the trust, the meaning, the boldness, and even the caution, you start to see that this book was never really just about seduction in the narrow sense people usually think. It's about emotional intelligence in motion, about understanding how human beings actually feel, connect, resist, and open up. Because whether in relationships, leadership, business, creativity, or everyday life, influence doesn't come from force, pressure, or loud effort. It comes from patience, observation, timing, and emotional control. The ability to read the room, sense unspoken needs, notice emotional gaps, and respond with presence rather than pushing with willpower. Since force creates resistance, people dig in, defend, pull away. But fascination, the feeling of being seen, understood, intrigued, emotionally stirred, creates openness. And that openness is where connection, cooperation, and real influence live. Throughout this journey, we saw how character matters before tactics, how emotional atmosphere shapes perception, how people respond to feelings more than logic, how shared meaning deepens bonds, how space prevents suffocation, how sensory detail make moments memorable, how bold action gives direction, and how after effects remind us that emotions are not toys, they are real forces that linger. And all of this adds up to a bigger truth. The real mastery isn't about controlling people like chess pieces. It's about understanding human desire, the desire to feel special,
safe, excited, inspired, free, understood, and meaningful. And when you understand those desires, you naturally communicate better, lead better, love better, and live with more awareness. This knowledge can make you more persuasive, yes, but it can also make you more compassionate. Because once you see how sensitive emotional experience is, you realize power must be handled responsibly, since the same skills that can charm can also harm if used carelessly. And that ethical reflection is what separates shallow manipulation from true life mastery, which is really about self-mastery first, managing your impulses, your need for control, your impatience, and developing the calm confidence to let connection unfold instead of trying to wrestle it into existence. And honestly, the funny part of being human is that we often try harder and harder when the real solution is to slow down, observe more, and create the kind of emotional presence that draws people in without strain, like turning on a light instead of pushing people through a door. When you apply these ideas to daily life, you become someone others feel good around, someone who listens, creates atmosphere, respects space, communicates with warmth, and acts with clarity. And that's attractive in every arena, from friendships to careers to creative work. Because at the core, this is about becoming more aware of the emotional dimension of life that most people ignore. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start noticing tone, timing, mood, subtle signals, and you move through the world with more finesse and less friction. So if this journey helped you understand people a little better, helped you see influence as emotional awareness rather than force, and gave you tools you can use positively in your life, go ahead and like the video, share it with someone who'd enjoy diving into human psychology, and subscribe to CliffNote Chronicles for more deep, practical breakdowns like this. Because learning how people feel, connect, and grow isn't just interesting, it's one of the most useful skills you can carry into every part of your life.